Hello and blessings, my beautiful souls. My name is Avalon and welcome back to my channel. Today I felt like having another little witchy chat with you. So please bear with me as I dive deep into the subject of ritual and witchcraft. Alright, so I'd like to start by sharing a few thoughts with you and a few little experiences that I've had, throughout the last, double decade. I'm quite drawn to ritual. I think ritual is really beautiful. I think it is something that can be ultra simple, but then something that can be very convoluted and extremely ceremonial in its way. And that's one thing that I find really appealing about ritual, is that you can make your ritual anything that you truly need. If you need something that is really, really deeply spiritual, ritualistic, very ceremonial, very enveloping, then you want to go for a rather big ritual. And big doesn't necessarily mean it holds up more space. Big just means that there are steps, there are details that need to be considered in order to really create that complex ritual environment. And so things need to be planned and thought out. And sometimes planning isn't even a step in ritual. Sometimes you are imbued with purpose to create a ritual that truly resonates with the feelings that you're having in these moments. I find this rather miraculous in a way, in that you kind of get hit with this desire and then suddenly poof, you explode out into the world, your beautiful witchy energy, and the ritual space is set up and everything is ready to go and everything has moved through, the channels and the avenues of intuition. What you need in that moment, the desire, the inspiration, the creativity, the want, etc., all manifests itself, rather spontaneously. And voila, you have a ritual. Other ways it's something that is more planned out, something that is scheduled, Alora, in accordance with the lunar cycles or the astrological cycles or astrological movements or seasonal aspects, or even time, light versus dark. There are certain types of magic that fit better for the morning or the daytime or the light half of the day, and then there are certain magics that deal better within that dark half of the day. And likewise, the light half of the year, the dark half of the year. And in case you're new, the light half of the year typically refers to spring and summer, and the dark half is autumn, winter. And this is referring to solar days specifically. And so ritual is such a elusive and elaborate and, sometimes misunderstood thing. And I have found that over time, and the longer I practice my craft, the more I distance myself from elaborate rituals, preferring instead to go for something that is simple. I prefer to inject ritual into my everyday life. So every day I wake up and I stretch and make my bed and wander out and put the kettle on. Every single day starts off in the same way, and I have my 2 cups of tea in exactly the way that I like. And God's help me if one of those elements is out of step. For example, I usually put a dash of cream in my cup of tea, but if there's no cream and I have to use milk, I'm already pretty pissed off and derailed. So I have a pretty strict way in which I conduct my life, especially in the mornings and especially in the evenings. I have kind of like a waking up and then a settling down kind of routine, and these are rituals in and of themselves. Now, before I step out of my house every day, I have those little rituals in place. I dab myself with the necessary oils for the conditions or the energies that I'm seeking to harness in, the day. And I go from there, and sometimes I'll, dust myself with a little sprinkling powder. Sometimes I'll pull cards. I'm more prone to pulling cards every second day these days rather than every first day, because it gives me time, because I'm studying Lenormand at the moment, it gives me that time to settle, to research, to walk away and give myself the time to marinate and then come back, and then I do my journaling on day 2. So that's typically how I'm going with things these days. If it's tarot and I'm working with a new deck, then it'll be a daily pull, and there's, no issue there. But when it comes to ritual, I find that some of the more cumbersome aspects of witchcraft get sort of weighed down by ritual. And if we're being perfectly honest, witchcraft and ritual are not synonymous one with the other. You can be practicing witchcraft without practicing ritual. Ritual is something that adds a spiritual dimension and even a religious aspect to the practice of witchcraft. So if you're the type of person that's not interested in, you know, deep-seated spirituality or religious connotations and things of that nature, dogmas and you know, doctrines and processes and protocols, then you may want to divorce yourself from ritual and practice straight up witchcraft, which is more doing, which is a lot more doing in that case. And pure witchcraft is very active. It's very fire, I find, in the way that it, you know, moves through your life. You know, it's, you identify the need, then you work within that context to create the solution, i.e. the magic or spell. And that is something that we do every day. And we fortify the magics that, you know, this is typical of witchcraft. You fortify the magic that you've created. A witch that has been practicing for a very long time knows the need of feeding spells. And I've spoken about the necessity to feed your magic in a video, which I will link in the cards up here if you haven't seen it already. But it is very important to fortify and strengthen your magic. And that's where things get into a loop. You do an act of magic, you create a spell, for instance, and boom, it's set. The aspect of feeding that spell every day in exactly the same way at a specific time, that there is ritual. So suddenly you've gone for a spell that requires a ritual feeding aspect to it. And therein lies that ritual. And if you don't want to do that ritual feeding aspect or the feeding of the spell, then what you need to do is design your spell in a more robust way so as you can avoid that step. And typically it means go big or go home, okay? Especially when it comes to magic. There is a size does matter in magic. I have, you know, come to discover that over the years. So a tiny little tea light doesn't stand a chance next to a kick-ass church-style pillar that's going to burn for days and days and days and days. See, if that candle is burning for days and days and days and days, there you have it. You light it, you set it, and it will go for days and days and days and days. So 7-day candles, which are really big in my country, in Brazil, which you can't buy here in Australia, apparently. I have an emergency one, just a side note. But that is exactly why such long burning candles are used, so that it's a set and almost forget kind of thing. And you know, you set up your magic around this 7-day candle, and it's going to burn for 7 days, and all you need to do is keep an eye on it. You know, the magic then is differentiated. You know, there is magic that is heavy in ritual, like the regular feeding of spells, which I rather enjoy. Like, that's the type of ritual that I really like, because it's practical, it's straightforward. But I remember that there was a time where I loved elaborate rituals, especially with my coven up north. We would organize a time in accordance with the lunar phase and any kind of astrological occurrence. Like a specific hour would be set, a specific location would be set, and we would go out and we would adorn this enormous space. And it took time and it took resources and it took energy, but there was also multiple people collaborating on that creation, in which case things just manifested themselves really easily, very quickly. But it was also something that needed to be planned. So up north, in accordance with this desire to do these elaborate rituals, which were always really fun to do with other people, we'd all have our little witch basket, our little traveling witch kit, if you will. And we were able to stock that up. So we had all sorts of things in there to facilitate the creation of last minute rituals or the planning of future rituals. And, you know, there's a lot involved in ritual itself, and that's something that I've always been really drawn to and really fascinated by, is that aspect of ritual. The culture and the religion that I come from, which is Umbanda, which I've spoken a lot about of late here on my channel, it is deeply ritualistic. It is insanely ritualistic. Umbanda cannot be practiced by an individual alone. It just cannot. There are so many steps, there are so many processes, protocols, rituals, and structures that need to be adhered to, that cannot be modified. Because if you do, the moment you take one thing out, it's no longer Umbanda. It's no longer the religion that it was. And so everything has to happen in a specific way under a specific structure, so to speak. And so I grew up participating in elaborate rituals. So I was always, you know, immersed in these rituals and loved it. I loved it. But then again, I was a child who did not participate necessarily in the setting up of rituals. Sure, I'd give a hand here and there. You know, I wouldn't just be sitting back and watching everybody do things. Like all the kids used to pitch in with small little jobs and that. But it was really fun, and it never felt like work. It never felt cumbersome. But now, you know, since I've lived here in Australia and I've had my beautiful coven up north, and we did so many initiatory practices and, you know, astrological practices and lunar practices and solar practices and Sabbath practices and all of that, everything was deeply, deeply elaborate. And coming down to Tasmania, where I feel very singular, very solitary in my practice in a way, it enabled me to look at the things that I actually enjoy doing. And I don't enjoy elaborate rituals anymore. I enjoy sharing elaborate rituals with other people. But for myself, I'm not here really doing any elaborate rituals. It's just not something that I feel called to do in this space, in this time of my life right now. And I found that because of that, because I've made that, because I've understood that, I've made that decision, and I've accepted that this cycle, this time in my life is not about elaborate rituals. It's about personal, deep inner work and, you know, straight up, full ball, folk magical style witchcraft. I feel sassy about my magic now. That's how it's going. Like I'm out, I'm dressed and ready to go. I'm gonna go out in a minute. I'm gonna walk out there and I'm just gonna with my oils, and I'm just gonna start, like, might pull a card, and I just like to let it flow. I like to let it be really, really just fluid, and I like to see what comes of the day, what intention is gonna pop up in my mind. You know, I love that aspect of, you know, the changeability, the unpredictable nature of that type of approach. I know that every day I'm going to do a little magic, every day, whether it be just anointing myself with some of the oils, pulling a card, lighting a candle, setting an intention, saying a mantra, or doing something else entirely, depending on what it is, writing out a petition, burning a petition, smoke cleansing myself, etc. Like every day I'm going to be doing something like that, but I don't know what it's going to be until the day of, until I'm standing there going, what do I need today? And this really helps me to sink into who I am, what I want, my goals, my desires for the day, and to just feel in the moment what it is that I need. If I planned for today's ritual yesterday when I was busy and exhausted and tired and just in a different headspace altogether, then I would not make a successful plan for myself for today, because what I need today is something totally different. And so spontaneity happens to be the thing that I'm into. It's the ritual that I'm into. Spontaneity. Every day doing a little something. Every day I'm going to do something which makes it ritualistic, but the nature of that magic, the nature of what I do will change from day to day in accordance with my need. Now, ritual. Ritual is deeply satisfying. A ritual that is done well, it will feed your fucking soul. It will recharge you. You will walk away feeling energized, feeling jazzed, feeling completely lit from within, from a sacred fire that you have yourself lit through that ritual practice, and it will burn bright within you. It's an incredible thing to be well fed after a ritual. Like a full ritual can be incredibly, incredibly activating. And I cannot emphasize that enough. When you are on your own and there is just no energy left. You know, people are busy these days with parents and study and work commitments and pandemics and so many obligations, so many responsibilities, that finding time in which you can allocate yourself realistically at least 4 to 5 hours just doesn't happen. It just cannot happen that way anymore. Some people still can do that. The way we would do it up north is to allocate a time after the babies were asleep. So a few of us were parents. We had kids to consider and partners to consider and all of that. And so our, you know, rituals, can't speak, was usually set up for later on in the day. And, you know, that's how we did it. But these days, it's harder and harder to allocate such huge chunks of time to something like a ritual unless it is a super special occasion, you know. And so when it comes to things like, you know, Memory May, for instance, which is, you know, very spiritual, very ancestral in its way, part of our Coven Sabbaths and practices. And when it comes to that, the whole family gets involved. I get the whole family into it. Likewise, you know, midwinter, I always make a beautiful roast, or I make a really beautiful stew or something like that, something really hearty, and I decorate the space and I set up the table like I don't do any other day, and then everybody gets involved. And in those instances, I'm putting in a little extra emphasis, a little extra energy on creating a space that feels special, and that I still feel like doing from time to time. But going outside and setting up with flowers and candles and all sorts of things like I used to, and perimeters and boundaries and altars, and it just takes so long. I can't be bothered doing that. I cannot be bothered doing that. And it's a beautiful evolution in my personal practice. I don't have the time for that. I don't have the time for that anymore in my practice and in my life. And, you know, I love that. I love that kind of, I love the boundaries that brings. I like the definitive stances that can put myself into across the board, across my life, right? But ritual, I always look back on the rituals that I've had and the rituals that I will probably have one day in the future as well, because I'm not completely divorced of ritual. I always look at ritual as though it is another pathway to a different kind of magic. I also find that when it comes to ritual, and I've said this before, ritual adds that spiritual layer, that almost religious layer to your practice. You know, a beautiful witchy ritual feels very different to the rituals of other faiths and traditions, and something else comes of that. It's a different energy, it's a different atmosphere, it's something that is, it's just otherworldly in my opinion. And so there's something very beautiful about that. And I think that, you know, when we're looking at this in a rather kind of discerning manner, when we're just looking at things like this in a rather discerning manner, I like to thank, you know, the practice of Wicca for what it's done to, you know, to witchcraft. Many people don't understand that a lot of what witches practice comes from the practice of witchcraft. The neo-pagan wheel, very Wiccan, the lord and lady, the pantheon, the dual pantheon, the deity, the dual deity, very Wiccan. Specific ways of laying out tools on the altars, the very tools that are placed on the altar. Like when you're looking at a witch's altar, you will soon know who has been influenced by Wicca, by the sheer beautiful way that they have laid out their altar in a very ritualistic manner. So I find that Wicca is a bit of the gateway, like a gateway drug to witchcraft these days, and it has been at least since the 90s. That's been the case. Wicca is very heavy in its rituals. It has protocols. It's a religion. It has its structure. It has the way in which it does things, and a lot of that has been injected into straight up witchcraft. Those who practice, you know, just folk magic or their own creation of magic, their own style of witchcraft. Some of that is or has been infused into witchcraft, which then gives that look of witchcraft being rather ritualistic. But truth be told, when you're practicing witchcraft, there is nothing that you need. Not really. You collect what you want to collect. You collect that which is a reflection of your practice. And I've said this before probably more times than I care to count now. But if you're a kitchen witch, then the majority of your equipment will be related to your practice. If you are a more herbal style witch, then the majority of the equipment that you gather, the tools, the ephemera, the religious ephemera that you need are going to be reflective of your practice. And you know, the types of things that we accumulate within our practice is typically a reflection of the practice that we are most engaged in. So I like to work with a lot of oils, which you're going to see on all of my altars, are copious amounts, little bottles of oils and sprays. I like to work with candles, so I typically have stashes, like hundreds of candles at a time. I work with my odisha, so I have statuary on my altars for my odisha. And, you know, I have magical bowls just kicking ass and charging there because of the magic that I've created. And I have tarot because that's what I do professionally as well. And so everything on my altar has a purpose and a reason for being there. It's not there decoratively. It's there for a reason. You know, I've had people come in to my altar, which is just out there in the sunroom, and say, oh, that's really pretty. Why do you have a bundle of cinnamon sitting atop that green rice bowl? And I'm like, it's money magic. Like, it's prosperity magic. It's right there. I've got things charging all the time. I have placed things beautifully. Yes, it looks great. Yes, thank you for the Taurus in me for doing that. But it's there for a reason. It's there for a purpose. And, you know, that's the really beautiful thing about the craft, is you get your own signature, so to speak. But yes, when it comes to ritual in witchcraft, you don't need to engage in ritual to practice witchcraft if you don't want to. The choice is yours. You know, we go for what we need. I find that the practices that I typically engage in, they're born out of a moment in my life where a specific need was paramount. And so the practices that I then engage in are pretty vital to the outcome that I'm seeking. But if you are, you know, just practicing magic on the fly, which I find absolutely delicious, and it's divorced of ritual in part, I find that you can have a lot of fun with that. There's a lot of room for spontaneity. There's a lot of room for experimentation there as well. There's a lot of room to play with new ingredients and to see how things work. Whereas when you are set into rituals every single day, it can feel cumbersome. And I do find, and this is just from personal sort of observation and the fact that I offer spiritual slumps readings as a professional tarot reader, what I have acknowledged is that a spiritual slump happens when the expectation for your practice is too high, and you feel like you need to do X, Y, and Z every day, or you're not legit, or you're not a real witch, or, you know, if you're not following all of the rituals and all of the books that you've read, then you can't possibly be a witch. So you need to strive towards something, and nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing. Witchcraft can be tapped into every single day with intention, with purpose, with need, with desire. And the absence of an act of magic in your life does not make you less of a witch. It just means that you didn't need that magic today. You had nothing that you wanted for in that day. You're not working towards anything in that moment. And so it doesn't make you less of a witch. It doesn't put you in a spiritual slump. You work when you need to work. You craft, you cast and craft. I was trying to say those both at the same time. When you need to. That's the beautiful thing about it. It's a response to a need, a desire, to an outcome. And so if you're finding that you are in a space within your practice and you're not exactly doing something every single day, then there are remedies for that if you do want to be the type of person that practices magic every single day. But if you're cool with that, then just go with it. You know, fortify your protection magics, have a couple of spiritual baths, clean your house, and then smoke cleanse it. There's always something that we can do within the context of magic, feeding the charms that you might hang by the door, lighting candles to bring a blessing into the space. You know that a loved one is going through a bit of difficulty, so you can light a candle. Honestly, if you want me to do a specific spiritual slumps video, I absolutely will, simply because I guarantee you that you don't need to be in a spiritual slump if you don't want to, and if you're not okay with that. Okay, so if you are the type of person that is in a bit of a slump, but you're okay with that because right now there's nothing that you need and there's no reason for you to practice any kind of magic, then that's fine as well. But I would put this out there. Protection magic requires a lot of maintenance, daily, weekly, monthly maintenance. And so protection magic is one of those foundational elements of witchcraft and this type of magic, this type of practice, earth-centric spiritual systems, folk magic, esoterica, the occult, call it what you will, right? Protection magic is grassroots, ground level, foundational elements. And that, my friends, that, my beautiful witches, requires a lot more tenacity than you might believe, because there is something that you can do every day. There is something that you can do every day, and that's what makes it such a elaborate situation. So different types of magic require different types of approaches and different types of energies and different types of structures, if you will. And depending on the magic that you're practicing, you know, you'll need to go a little bit more heavy on the maintenance, and you know, that will determine how your practice will be for a minute or two, you know. But if you're the type of person that wants a bit more of a chill kind of practice, and you feel like divorcing yourself from ritual entirely, just keeping that for, you know, birthdays and special occasions, weddings, funerals, all that kind of beautiful stuff, right? If that's you, that's totally fine as well. There's nothing written down anywhere that says you have to practice ritual, you have to practice witchcraft every day, and you have to be on all the fucking time, because you absolutely don't, because life is big and it occupies a lot of space and it can intrude in the blissful nature of your everyday. In which case, then you don't have time. And not having time is a legitimate excuse these days because of our hustle culture. So we're smack bang in the middle of this hustle culture. You gotta do. You don't have time to mourn. You don't have time to cry. You don't have time to be sick. You don't have time for your kids. You don't have time to read a book. You don't have time, because time is a most precious commodity, an incredible resource, and it dictates the pleasures and the opportunities that we can have in our everyday life. And so if you are in that vibe right now where you're like, I don't have fucking time to do anything, there's a spell that you can do. There's a spell that you can do, you know, road opener right there for you to really open up the space so that you can have more quality time with your family, with your practice, with yourself, for a holiday, without compromising, you know, the financial aspects that are already in place that are making you hustle. So how did a conversation about ritual get so involved? This is why I love these witchy chats, folks, and I hope that you have been able to take something away from this and use that to put something into perspective for yourself. Ritual is beautiful, and ritual is amazing, and ritual is rewarding, but ritual isn't necessary every single day. It's just not. Witchcraft is amazing. It's fun. It can be creative. It can be spontaneous, and it can be divorced of ritual if you need it to be, because time is of the essence. And so it's okay for you to sit down and acknowledge that what you need right now differs from what you needed back in the day and what you might need in the future. Our practices as witches work in seasons, and everybody's season is different because everybody's cycles are different, and everyone's moods are different, and everyone's responses to the atmosphere, to nature, to the seasons, to the weather is different. So we all need something different, and we're all working within our own very unique rhythm. And so acknowledge and be grateful for the practice that you have now. Adjust it if you feel like it needs a little zhuzhing. And if you're feeling a little, oh, I don't have time to do a lot, that's okay. That's okay. Don't force yourself to do it, because then you'll start to get in that headspace of obligation, and it'll feel heavy, and it will feel cumbersome, it will feel painful. You'll get into a slump, and then you'll go, whoa, it's me, I'm in a slump. Ugh. Don't put the pressure on yourself. Witchcraft is not about pressuring yourself to do anything. Witchcraft is a remedy to a life that feels unsatisfying. Witchcraft is the upper hand. Witchcraft is used when you need to level up, to even the odds, to smooth out and level out the playing field. That is what witchcraft is for. And if you're not in need of that type of situation in your life, then that's fine. Do something else that spiritually feeds you. But you don't have to be on practicing witchcraft every single day, immersed in deep rituals, doing step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. You know, it can be too much. Sometimes it's great to have all of those steps and we feel excited to do it, but other times it's just like, I don't have the time. And that's okay as well, my loves. That is perfectly okay. You have to nurture yourself. You have to fill your cup. And if you're engaged in a practice within your craft that is not filling your cup, then adjust your practice so that it can. Go into metaphysical maintenance if you're finding yourself flat every single fucking day. Go into metaphysical maintenance and start to practice that beautiful, beautiful energizing and that filling of that cup, because that will make you a better witch, because you will be vibing. You will be bright and sparkly, enthusiastic, willing, capable, and alive from the inside out, you know, and that beautiful spiritual ignited fire. And it's a beautiful thing. So give yourself what you need in the context of your craft, and divorce yourself from ritual if it is feeling too heavy for you right now, because you can also pick it up again. You can also infuse a little ritual element here, there, and everywhere in your craft. It only has to be light. It's a light touch and you have it there. And if that, you know, if figuring out that balance is going to help you in some way, then play around with, those little elements to make sure that things feel manageable, satisfying, energizing, cohesive, successful, productive to you. Just make sure that you're always looking at your craft in a way that will enable you to grow organically within your practice, but also nurture yourself, your family, your environment as you are going along. Witchcraft isn't a static thing, it's a dynamic thing. And so it will go up and down and up and down and up and down as it needs to, in accordance with your personal cycles, as we've previously stated. And so make sure to analyze your practice and give yourself what you need. And for heaven's sake, do not compare your practice with that of another. Again, we are all doing something different here. We are all working within a different rhythm. You may find that there are witches that you have a connection with because the practices that you're engaged in look similar, but they won't be exactly the same either. Coven practices, as close as they are because they're practiced by multiple people, those practices will be interpreted in slightly different ways, because that is what it's all about. It's putting that little spin on it, your spin, owning that, and really enjoying the way that you interpret that ritual. And so don't compare your practice to that of others, don't compare your skill set to that of others, and don't let people tell you how to practice your craft, because your craft is your craft, born out of your life and the life that you have lived up until this moment. And that life is nobody else's fucking business but your own. And so you're the only authority that you need to consider when it comes to your craft. So have fun with it. I hope you've enjoyed this little chat. I've had a lot of fun chatting to you about all sorts of things, predominantly ritual and witchcraft. And yeah, let me know what you thought. Give this one a thumbs up, share it around if you think that there's someone that could benefit from this little chat. And yeah, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, because I'm really looking forward to connecting with more people through these little witchy chats. All right, my loves, well, look after yourself. Mwah. See ya.